happy to very happy to facilitate this meeting. And well, so many luminaries from the field of archaeology, geology, and history, architecture have joined us today. So I think Dr. Tejas Garge's move for public participation, public dialogue is being very successful. I was just thinking now that isn't it too early after the last Saturday's meeting? But doesn't look like. Well, people are still quite enthusiastic, and you are successful there, Dr. Garge. I think we should start the meeting. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Karni. Uh, welcome everybody, everyone who is interested in the project of development of State Museum of Maharashtra. The inspiration came from our own Bhau Daji Lad Museum in Mumbai. And I had seen some of the small models of architectural blocks which were put up in colonial times. And then I read that those were kept open for public, for discussion, for dialogue, for giving the inputs to the government, whether there should be any change in design or whether this public project is feasible. All over criticism, dialogue between government and public. And we are passing through a time when some of the national scale projects are not discussed publicly, but they are being implemented. And as an administrator, I feel that this is my humble duty to open a dialogue with public, to citizens of our country who are responsible enough to give their valuable time to discuss a public project and give their valuable inputs. And this idea also came from our Secretary for Culture, Mr. Saurabh Vijay, that when we put up this committee, we should have the dialogue of the committee uh, in front of public. And I'm glad that Institution Trust is always there for our public outreach programs, for our academic programs. For past 3 years, it has been a successful partnership between Directorate of Archaeology and Institution Trust on academic and philanthropic level. So last week the response was great. Uh, uh, I received a lot of emails suggesting lacunas in the presentation that I made on behalf of government, and I won't call them as lacunas. And whatever we discussed last week, it was a preliminary basic idea. And again, idea for having a public dialogue is to enhance the main theme, remove lacunas. So it was great to have all the inputs, whomsoever has written to me or to Institution Trust. I'm really thankful to them. And today, now I invite Dr. Mayur Thakre to introduce today's experts. And I'm hoping to continue this dialogue in on next Saturday as well. And after that, we'll be compiling opinion from all experts, from all the participants and public in general. And then this committee will be submitting its report to the government so that it all will be incorporated while designing this public project called State Museum of Maharashtra. So it should really be a collective voice of public experts from the field to represent our culture of Maharashtra in full scale. So thank you, and over to you, Dr. Mayur Thakre.
Thank you, sir. Very pleasant good morning to all respected guests, today's speakers, and the attendees. With a great pleasure, I welcome you all to the second consultative seminar on the Maharashtra State Museum. Last week, most of us had been a part of the first consultative seminar, which had seen an enthusiastic participation on the brainstorming about the vision and plan for the proposed Maharashtra State Museum. As we are all aware that it is an ambitious venture undertaken by the Directorate of Archaeology and Museums, Government of Maharashtra, under the able leadership of Dr. Tejas Garge. And today we shall be continuing this deliberation come public consultations in this second consultative seminar, in which we have a range of experts from the different fields expressing their concept and model for the Maharashtra State Museum. On behalf of the Directorate, I take this opportunity to welcome our today's distinguished speakers one by one. So today, the first one to address us is Professor Vasant Shinde, a well-known archaeologist and institution builder. Well, I had privilege to train under him and to groom under his mentorship. As the founder general of the National Maritime Heritage Complex in Lothal, Gujarat, he has a lot to guide us. Sir, welcome to this event. Next, we have Commodore Dr. Odakal Johnson, the director of the Maritime History Society. It's a very reputed organization in the field of maritime studies and relations. And Dr. Johnson is the face known to all us for his expertise in the maritime relations, navigation, and strategic affairs. We would be definitely benefited by his expertise as well as experience. Sir, welcome to this seminar. As we all know that the fine arts section will be an important part of the Maharashtra State Museum. And to give us inputs about this, especially about the modern art, we today have Srimati Anita Rupavataram, the director of the National Gallery of Modern Art in Mumbai. Madam, I welcome you to this event. Dr. Amiteshwar Jha, the next speaker that we have, is a well-known personality in the field of numismatic studies and had served as the director of the internationally famous Indian Institute of Research in Numismatic Studies, which is located in Nashik, Maharashtra. His expertise will be instrumental for the Maharashtra State Museum. Sir, welcome to the seminar. Next, we have Professor Panduranga Sabre. He is an expert geologist and the head of the Department of Ancient Indian History, Culture and Archaeology of the Deccan College Postgraduate Research Institute, Pune. And we know that this legendary institute houses two very well-known museums at present. And his plan and vision will definitely benefit us for the geological and the prehistoric section of the Maharashtra State Museum. So, sir, welcome to the event. Next, we have Dr. Manjiri Kamath. She is a well-known expert in the field of modern history, especially on the industrial history, and she is associated with the University of Mumbai. We are sure that her expertise will be of great importance for the modern history sections of the section of the Maharashtra State Museum. Madam, welcome to the seminar. And at last, we have Dr. Nilambari Jagtap. She is the coordinator of the prestigious Chhatrapati Shahu Maharaj Center for Maratha Studies in the Shivaji University of Kolhapur. And she will share her views and vision about the Maharashtra State Museum. Her concept and plan for the museum, especially about the Maratha period's presentation in the museum, will be of great value to us. Madam, I formally welcome you to the seminar. But unfortunately, because of some family emergency, she will not be able to present her views today in this seminar. So we hope that she will join us in the next seminar. So with this formal welcome come introduction session, I pass over the next proceedings to Dr. Guruj Dalal. Thank you. Over to you, Dalal, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Thackeray. That's very kind of you. Thank you for introducing all the speakers. And yes, it's a very, very good list today. Without wasting anybody's time today, I would like to welcome Professor Vasant Shinde, ex-director of the Deccan College, somebody I trained under also, so I completely understand what Mayur was saying, and an NMHS founder director. So thank you very much, sir, for being here today, and over to you for your presentation.
Can you hear me? Sir, थोड़ा आवाज कमी होता है.
Now, hello. Hello.
Very faint voice, sir. थोड़ा volume बढ़ाना पड़ेगा, I think.
I've done that.
So still, miss, your misfired voice is coming, sir.
Okay. Just a minute. Give me some.
Yes, sir.
Minute again.
Shall we try it without the headphones, sir?
Hello, can you hear me now? Hello.
Better, but still very faint, sir.
Very faint.
Yeah.
I'll just reconnect.
Okay, sir.
I think Professor Shinde is having some technical issues. He'll be back with us in a minute. Please bear with us. Is Dr. Shinde back with us, Riddhi?
No, sir, not yet.
Dr. Thackeray, should we proceed with the next speaker and wait for Dr. Shinde to come in, or
Yes, sir.
wait another minute?
I think so, Miss. We should go to the next speaker, Dr. Johnson, sir, because I think Shinde sir must be having some technical issues, so that's why maybe.
I think sir is in rural Gujarat, so maybe there is some technical issue there.
I guess so.
So, sorry about that, folks. We'll have Dr. Shinde back as soon as he can log in. Our next speaker for the day today is Commodore Johnson. Commodore Oracle Johnson is the director of the Maritime History Society and has been doing yeoman service in putting the society forward, and have really expanded their scope in the last couple of years, and they have a large number of interns and projects in hand. And we've been seeing a lot of articles in the press coming out, which have come out from the stable of the MHS. So we'll ask Commodore Johnson to come in now. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Dalal. I trust I'm audible.
Yes, sir. You are audible.
Okay. I was actually looking forward to Professor Vasant Shinde speak first, obviously with his experience. But I suppose in the age of technology, we have to adapt. Greetings to Team Institution, Dr. Tejas Garge and the entire team at the Directorate of Archaeology and Museum, and to the very many illustrious peers and seniors who have had fabulous journey in the entire field of museology. I'm very honored, of course, on behalf of the MHS, but what I share here is in my personal academic and experiential capacity. And I am keeping an eye on the clock, and I hope to definitely be done in 10 minutes. Nearly 39 years ago, when I stepped up the gangway of the training ship Rajendra at Baucha Dakka, and in that year of pre-sea training, when I saw the precincts of many of the heritage components of the city of Mumbai, then called Bombay, and coming from a city of Agra with a number of monuments, I think I began a journey of recognizing this point today. So I am really honored to be here. What I want to begin with is to break a myth in one component of the museology in the state. Just to tell the audience that on 5th of April, 1979, National Maritime Day, because of the work of late Vice Admiral M.P. Avti, the National Maritime Museum was inaugurated at the Middle Ground, and it continues in different avatars to create maritime consciousness, including a period in which where the gallery was at the CSMVS. In fact, the honored Sadashiv Gorushkar is a founding trustee of MHS. And then we had the Indian museum ship Vikrant, and the artifacts were there. today we have a Naval Heritage Gallery at the MHS, and we soon hope to be back in a digital avatar as Samudra Sindhu. So on behalf of the Chief Patron and the trustees of MHS, we are very happy to contribute towards the effort of Mahasangrahalaya, the mother node, I would call, of Sagaralaya for us. We are hoping to be a digital research resource center in a few years. Allow me, despite the short time, to give you a 1-minute story. And this is a tourist visitor to the city of Mumbai who comes to the area of Apollo Bandar, where today the gateway is there. And recently I had a place, witness to see it absolutely abandoned. And he looks towards the iconic Taj Mahal Palace Hotel and asks someone, what is this? And they tell him it is the Taj. And this tourist visitor starts clicking photographs passionately, goes all around, comes in, and finally finds with a good, in a elegant dress, in a Sardar's dress, the man at the gate, and he comes in and he says, oh my Lord, they turned the Taj into a hotel. Okay, now why am I saying this? Sometimes even iconic structures and others with the lack of awareness can create a complete alteration of narrative. And I'm hoping that will never be the story just by the virtue of the method that we have taken. So where do I start with? I start with the state of Maharashtra. It is today a geopolitical entity with a wide range of cultural, historical, and artistic heritage. The state already has many museums which preserve different items from antiquity, art. It ranges from historical museums to numismatic galleries, museums of natural history, decorative arts, aquarium, and many more. Maharashtra has a unique set of prestigious institutions dedicated to preserving rich cultural and historical treasures. However, the need to give a state museum initiative is absolutely timely, and this effort must be taken for completion, and I am a part of it. So may I, on behalf of my team at MHS, present humbly a few things. And I remember Dr. Sabyasachi Mukherjee talking about vision. I am a vision and strategy person. I am not an expert in museology details, but I want to share my vision. And my vision is spelled in 3 C's. The first is the canvas. कोई भी कलाकार अगर कोई चित्रपट पर अगर कुछ करता है तो पहले उसके मन में कैनवस पे जाता है. So the canvas must be, allow me to show this, and I'm not an architect, but it should be a helical structure that starts from today, goes back to geology and topography to the very past, and in the return come back to today and give the visitor an idea of what the future is going to be. Now, I know only probably an artist in architecture will get, but I will share it with some designs when I put this. So that's the canvas. It should not be a singular structure. It should not be a unidimensional structure. The second C is curation or the methodology. This Mahasangrahalaya must have tangible and intangible, rather tangible collections and an intangible immersive experience to enable the visitor to reflect on the past and identify a roadmap for that individual. And you will get where I'm going. And the third C, or the concept and the techniques. Let us remember, we are creating this Mahasangrahalaya in 2021 or in a few years from today. So while we are talking of the past, it has to be ready for people of today and the future. So it should be future ready while it is anchored in antiquity, which leads lives with learning for gross effectiveness. My entire idea, the visitor is king. The visitor is the one which every effort of Mahasangrahalaya must focus. Be it an ordinary peasant walking in and saying, wow, or an intellectual giant coming in to get an experience. So the next part in this flagship projects needs a 6-dimensional approach. Now you're wondering what is 6? 3 are obvious dimensions of space, terrain, and the maritime medium. Maharashtra is blessed from the mountains to the valleys, to the creeks, to the coast, to the seafront. So it should do, this three-dimensional approach should be reflected in the museum. The other three dimensions are, we must travel through time back and forward to the future. The fifth dimension, it should reflect thought, philosophy, faith, and intellect. That means the philosophical element must be there. And the last dimension is potential. That means, as I will repeat, as I've said many, the visitor must go back with an idea, I have a future in this state. And that is my heart of what is in this, I believe, is a vision. So in short, what are the immediate steps? And I'm again taking very inspired by Professor Mukherjee, but I had already written this, so I'm happy we are in convert. Immediate step is, I believe one of the earliest things after the committee submits its report is to appoint a curator or a director general who has a multi-dimensional ability to have a vision and strategy more than the details. And the Museum Advisory Committee can then become the muscles and sinews and the components. Second is the execution methodology. I'm borrowing from my thesis, is a 3M philosophy, which is called mandate. You already have it. State government has said we must have a Mahasangrahalaya. The mechanism like this consultative committee should include every stakeholder, from the furthest community to the highest intellectual. That should be this mandate. We must not leave a single component, but the execution should be in a mission mode. Once you decide those people who are going to do, there should be no diversion. Democracy is a good form of governance, but not for practice in things like this. You know, you consult everyone, but when you do what is to be done. So that's all in brief I have to say. And let me close with this line I tried to write. Maharashtra के महासंग्रहालय को महासागर की महासंकल्प पर महाशुभकामनाएं. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Commodore Johnson. That is so sweet of you, especially that last line. But I think what we will take back with us is what you have said before this. And I completely agree with you that we need to start asking the Department of Archaeology and Museums to start creating a structure. And I'm sure Dr. Garge has got that completely in hand also. So if Dr. Shinde is back with us, we can have Professor Shinde next. Is he with us?
Yes, sir.
Riddhi?
Yes, sir.
Then let's have Professor Shinde. I think he's got a connection. Let's try and see if we can get him on board. Sir, please unmute yourself.
Hello. Hello, can you hear me now?
Again, very faint, sir.
Still same problem?
No, much better, but still quite faint. We can hear much better now.
Okay, so should I start now?
Yes, sir, please.
Okay. So friends, you know, all of you know that I am an archaeologist. I did archaeology for last 43 years and I'm still continuing, of course. I have not stopped doing that. But ultimately, after doing this, I realized that the knowledge that we are generating, that should reach to the people. And also this heritage or archaeology should serve as a nation builders. So when I got an offer after I completed my term as a Vice Chancellor in Technical College, I got a offer from the National Maritime Heritage Complex to join that as a founding Director General. I immediately grabbed that opportunity because I wanted to put my knowledge in fact to use, the knowledge that I have generated. So today, for last 2 years, I have been associated with this National Maritime Heritage Complex, and the National Maritime Heritage Museum is one of the key component of this complex. So I'm going to discuss about the experience and how we have gone about for this particular project, and perhaps that will maybe give some hint in fact as to how we have to proceed for developing one of the uh, uh, museums in Maharashtra. I think I'm sure that the government of Maharashtra is planning a big kind of something like a Bihar museum type museum in Maharashtra, and that is certainly a need of the hour. So initially, I was the Director General for 1.5 years, and now I'm acting as an advisor to the National Maritime Heritage Complex. So what we have done in Patna initially, we were discussing about the place of the museum. There was a lot of discussion happening on that, and ultimately, we decided that the museum should be in such a place where we have some maybe backdrop also, and the benefit of the museum in fact go to this particular region. So instead of maybe place like Mumbai or Goa, which were the options in the initial stage, we decided to establish this at Lothal, because Lothal has a backdrop, the earliest dockyard in the world. And secondly, Lothal is relatively remote place. Once this museum is developed there, I'm sure that a lot of people are going to visit, and there will be a lot of maybe economic benefit, transformation happening to this area. So that is how we have uh, shortlisted or focused on this particular place. Secondly, when I joined this project, the sorry, the plan of the building was already ready. But then we realized that perhaps that this is not the way to go for the development of a modern museum. So what we decided, we decided to clear our concept of the museum properly. Secondly, we also decided on the number of galleries and the theme of the galleries. And in the third stage, we developed the academic content of all the galleries first. And we had very series of committees. We have subject experts, and the content that was developed by us, that was verified, vetted by the subject experts. And finally, this all the content of all the galleries is ready now. So our next stage is that once now we are working in fact with the design team, and I'm sure that Batul is here. Perhaps she was to join this program, but Batul is one of the be the main consultant for this particular museum now. So now we are developing the concept of each and every gallery, and once the concept of the gallery is clear, we are preparing a virtual plan of each and every gallery. And once this is done, then perhaps we are going for the development of the museum building. Not that we have built the museum building and then we are going for the display. It is not like that. So this is how we have proceeded, and now it is becoming clear in fact how the plan has to be, and what should be the overall component of the museum. That is becoming clear. So the museum place, of course, museum is a place for the education, but at the same time, what we want to showcase here is what is the contribution that our ancient cultures have made, and how we are going to learn from that, and how that knowledge is going to be used for maybe the maybe nation building. That is also important. So that component also is going to be important part of the museum. So in this stage now, we have decided that we are going to hire the best maybe design team, the best maybe lighting experts, and also the best architect. And the architect now is working on the development of the overall plan of the different galleries. So that is what we have been doing. And initially government thought that we should develop this museum through this PWD or the CPW. But now it has become clear that we should hire the best architect for this, for best maybe contractor for building this particular museum. So we are going to hire, maybe we are going to float the international tender for that, and perhaps we are going to choose the best maybe contractor for building this particular museum. So museum alone is not really enough. There should be other maybe other facilities which should really attract maybe people and students. So we have, special gallery for the students. Maybe they can come there and play there. Also, there will be other facilities like maybe hotels and restaurants also as a part of the complex. Plus, we are going to also have the Institute for Heritage or the Maritime Heritage Studies. Also, we are going to have maybe IMAX there. So these are the other facilities which will attract people, and people can spend whole day there and they can stay there. So this is the plan, overall plan that we have, and I'm sure that from our experience, what I have learned, in fact, that experience I have spoken to you, and perhaps this will also help in developing the one of the best museum in fact in the countries at in Maharashtra. So I thank the organizers for inviting me, and I'll be happy to work for this museum, because this is certainly, as Dr. Johnson said, that this is certainly one of the important regions in fact in the country, and we should have a proper and perhaps the international museum in this place. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very, very much, Professor Shinde. I think Professor Shinde has brought out something that nobody has really pointed out this far, that there should be much more than just a museum. There should be adjacent facilities that very specifically attract both academics and non-academics to the location and therefore to the museum itself. So I think that peripheral development is an equally important point. And I think Professor Shinde has made a very valid point there, not to mention that his experience along with Ashwini Kumarji from the Bihar Museum and actually going through this process will be invaluable in helping the Maharashtra State Museum in shortening the time taken to do the things that they want to do, and in also making sure that we don't make the same mistakes, because these mistakes will have been made and will have been corrected. So these course corrections should make our lives much easier at the DOM and the Maharashtra State Museum. Thank you very, very much, Professor Shinde, for that. Our next speaker today is Srimati Anita Rupavartham. Srimati Rupavartham is the director of the National Gallery of Modern Art in Mumbai. And the floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dalal. And I feel very privileged to be a part of this committee. And whatever I would be speaking is basically from my experience of about 2.5 years of running a government gallery. As many of you would know, the National Gallery of Modern Art is a subordinate organization of the Ministry of Culture, Government of India. And we function from fort in a heritage building, which we have taken on lease from the state government. Now, let me also say that while I am a serving civil servant on deputation to the Ministry of Culture, I'm also a student of ancient history and archaeology. And so, though it's been quite a while since I kind of switched streams, but I still do have that love for archaeology. And I hope whatever insights I give would help in the way the museum is envisioned. Now, I have also been listening to various eminent speakers, and like Dr. Mukherjee said last time, the location of the museum is pretty important. And since the state government has taken such a wonderful initiative, the location must be central, move heaven and earth, but then I think it is within their powers to ensure that it's not in some suburb or some other city, but that it comes to Mumbai and in the center of Mumbai. And secondly, because I am a government servant, I understand the kind of limitations that the government functions with. Funding remains a major issue. So I think here CIDCO could be useful. If CIDCO can be roped in some capacity, because they do have the wherewithal and the funds. So they could, in fact, help in funding the project. So because this is going to be a capital intensive and a very ambitious project. So funding and CIDCO. And from the way I have, experienced the issues that crop up in the day-to-day administration of a government gallery, I also wonder what kind of a revenue model there would be, whether it would essentially be only a state-owned museum? Or would there be some kind of a PPP model? Because the problem with the government setup, or let's say the way it functions, is that there is enough for capital expenditure, but the recurring revenue expenditure meeting ends is always an issue. So this is something that should be focused upon right from the beginning, so that when we start off with the right model, then we do achieve the goals that we are aiming to achieve. So finance should always be, a concern, and it should be flagged. And let me just give you an example. In our gallery, the foreigners are charged 500 rupees and the Indians are charged 20 rupees. And this always is an issue of heartburn. You have many of the foreigners coming to me and saying, why are we paying 500? Why are the Indians only paying 20? So these are issues which may look minor, but then when you are envisioning it, you should take even these issues into consideration, so that there is no heartburn and it is self-explanatory. So based on how museums abroad, for example, have their ticket entry rules, so that has to be factored in. Then I also have realized that the audience that we are seeking to address is very important. Now, what I see in my gallery is that it's almost like preaching to the converted. It is a niche audience that it almost aims to address, because art is something that possibly not many would understand or appreciate. Those coming in from the tourist buses would not know what modern art is. So our aim is to reach out to them. Instead of preaching to the converted, there is that elite group which always comes, which enjoys, which leaves good comments. But then in order to ensure that the common man understands what is going on, because ultimately they are the bulk and it is they whom we want to reach out to, not the connoisseurs who already know what it is. So the entire experience therefore should be demystified. So there's no point of flowery language and poetic language that can be reserved maybe for certain spaces, but it should demystify. And since it is in Maharashtra, Marathi should be a part of the entire text. So you should have English, of course. You should have Hindi also, but then Marathi, in order to converse with the visitor, the ordinary visitor who comes from the tourist bus, or anyone who in fact just walks in. So it's very important, the language that is used. Then accessibility is another issue that I have faced. And you have the High Court directives which say that it should be accessible, be it the toilets, be it the galleries. So, and we are saddled with a heritage structure. Therefore, we are not in a position to have the lift which is accessible to all floors. So since you are starting off on a fresh page, please ensure that all places, all floors are accessible in all ways to everyone, be it the physically challenged or the normal person. Then another issue is that when you plan the area, there should be enough scope for expansion, because obviously with the kind of vision that we have, and we have to be futuristic, and there could be many more issues, there could be many more visions coming up, and therefore there must be enough vacant space which doesn't look jarring, but nevertheless something which leaves scope for expansion. The other issue is about the way the layout of the museum should be. Being a student of history, I have seen that it was traditionally pretty chronological and dynastic. So both views were expressed, whether it should be dynastic or chronological, or the other was thematic. Now, I thought perhaps a third dimension or a third way of looking at it could be the organization of spaces, because man, since the prehistoric times, has ultimately tried to shape various spaces, which of course do intermingle. You can't have them compartmentalized, but nevertheless, there is a continuum and there is some kind of a break as well. So you could have the sacred space, the royal space, the industrial space, the residential space. I mean, it could be left to imagination. Perhaps space in general and the categorization of space could also be another way of looking at it. And this is what even archaeological excavations have revealed, that you have spaces organized in different ways, and the interaction between those spaces also is a very important part of the study. May I also add again about the staff that we would be hiring. Now, again, which would depend on the kind of model that we go for. If it is going to be a purely government museum, then of course you should have your RRs written, the recruitment rules, and ensure that the best in the field are taken. So whether it would be on contract, whether these would be government servants. So that is something to which a lot of thought has to be put to. You could also have interns, you could have children who are doing their summer projects. So the sky is the limit, but then all that should be envisioned. You can't learn it as you go. That is our experience. We are short of staff. So that is very, very important. So even before you envision, and as Dr. Kenneth had said, that you should have a small place, a kind of a tentative setup, and you could have people already working on it. So these could be the people then who would actually be running the show later on. Then if I were to just speak about fine art, because basically my museum or my gallery deals with fine art, well, let me say that when it comes to fine art, of course, unlike the antiquities, you still have them being produced. It's a work in progress kind of thing. It keeps evolving. So you should be very clear about space organization in fine art, because you would have a permanent collection, I presume, and then you would have upcoming artists or those to whom you want to pay a tribute to. So space will always be an issue. So a temporary exhibition space and a permanent exhibition space as far as fine arts goes is extremely important. And whom you're going to, and again, art is a field where you have, it's of course, the commercially driven people who are into this business of art, they buy artworks and they have galleries. So this interplay between the commercial and the governmental setup is not easy to deal with. And this is something that you will have to think about. So what kind of equation you would have with the private galleries. And there is always that shadow boxing that is going on, so which you should be wary of. And fine art per se, the storage is very important, especially in a place like Mumbai, which I presume would be the place where the museum would be set up. Humidity is a major issue. So dehumidifying facilities and data loggers. So all the latest technology for maintenance of the ambient conditions should be taken into account. So these were a few things that I wanted to flag. And of course, the vision should be perfect. We should understand that while the government is into the act of promoting art, but at the same time, to be completely functioning like an NGO in these times will not help. So you have to have some kind of, I wouldn't say profit orientation, but operational costs should get covered. You should have the little. And so please insist that whatever revenue is generated by the museum is plugged back into the museum. It doesn't go into the consolidated fund. Otherwise, it's like a drop in the ocean and you will never get it back. So these are a few issues that that came to my mind based on what the others had spoken and based on my own experience. So with this, I would conclude my speech. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, ma'am. I think the highlighting of these operational issues and these administrative issues and issues which, if addressed in the very beginning and the conception itself, will ensure that the problems will not occur in the operational years is something very, very important. And I think these are some critically important points that Rupavadram ji has made. And we should definitely take these into very serious cognizance. Thank you very, very much, ma'am. I think these are incredibly valid points that you have made. And I'm sure that Dr. Garge and his team will be taking serious consideration of what you said. Thank you very much, ma'am. And we move on to the next speaker for the day. The next speaker is Dr. Amiteshwar Jha of the Indian Institute of Numismatic Studies. He is the director of the Indian Institute of Numismatic Studies at Nashik, or at Anjaneri to be precise. And he's one of the very silent warriors of numismatics and the understanding of numismatics and numismatic museums and research. So thank you very much, sir, for being here with us. And we look forward to listening to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Kurush. It's a very happy feeling to hear and see all those whom you know live and kicking in this tumultuous time. Good morning and greetings to all the learned participants. I'll rather be very brief because I have only a few points to make. The other very cogent and convincing points have been made by my preceding speakers. Firstly, I fully endorse the practical suggestions that were made by Dr. Sabyasachi Mukherjee Sahab about the location of the museum, efforts for procuring of objects, etc. And also the suggestion made by Shri Anjani Kumar Singh Ji of Bihar Museum, that I personally feel that it shouldn't be a typical run-of-the-mill kind of museum. And his suggestion was that it should be story-based, because that helps in attracting the young students and holds their attention. So the focus should be on the stories. And accordingly, the themes will have to be decided, not the kind of straight-jacketed dynastic themes or period-wise themes and so on and so forth. My suggestion is that first, the focus of the museum be identified, because I'm slightly apprehensive that the range of themes that Tejas Saab had presented, if all are included, then it would become rather unwieldy. So whether it should be archaeological, historical, and cultural museum, or it should also include the tribal focus and other modern cultural festivals, and whether it should also include the personalities, etc. Because I personally feel that if at all we have to have a kind of wax museum, then it should be left for at a later stage, when we should concentrate on our efforts on some kind of related and limited kind of themes. And if it's a success, then there'll be a demand for people on, say, ethnographic museum, tribal museum, wax museum, on personalities museum, etc. And then they can be made kind of additional museums of world class. So first thing is that the focus, I mean, it should be discussed, and then focus of the museum should be identified. It shouldn't be too unwieldy. That's one suggestion. Because once we identify the themes, then only the work of procurement of objects, where they are, identifying the objects, where they are, whether they can be had from the other institutions or other collections or not, that will be decided. Because I personally feel that getting the objects would again be a kind of problematic thing, even though it's a government thing and Department of Archaeology has a big resource of its own. But even then, you cannot expect that that all the prominent objects that are at there in that museum, that you will get them and give it to the state museum. Maybe one or two objects, yes, but you cannot pick up everything remarkable there and then bring it here. Because the other state, I mean, then the uniqueness of those local regional museums will also be lost. So the themes should be identified, and then, and if it's in the kind of, if in the form of, say, story, then the focus would not be on large number of objects. The objects may be limited, the other objects may be digitized, and then we can plan our presentation. The third thing that my preceding speaker national visitors, and Marathi is very important for the local visitors. So, but it should also be kept in mind that actually the text should be very carefully written so that it doesn't become kind of overbearing. It should be easy. It should be easily understandable. That is very important, and which I totally agree with Anita ma'am, that that's a very important point. Another point that I want to make is that the private collectors should also be identified and approached, because particularly for smaller objects like coins on which I work, actually the good and better specimens are mostly in the collections of private hands. And since last, I think 10, 20 years, last 2 decades, the findings of treasure troves are very limited because there are large number of collectors in Maharashtra, and people in those areas where coins are found have realized its importance. So they usually sell it to the collectors, dealers, etc. And the hoards seldom get acquired under the Treasure Trove Act. So the treasure troves that are there are of limited type of coins, whereas for early historic period, most of the finds that have been made are mostly concentrated in private hands. And I personally feel that if they are properly acknowledged, then there'll be a large number of collectors willing to donate or give it on loan to the museum. So they should, in due course of time, should also be involved. So these are some of the points that I wanted to make as far as operational and administrative issues are concerned. They were very well articulated by Anita ma'am. And I thank the organizers for including me as advisor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Amiteshwarji. I think you've made some very valid points, especially about the acquisition of objects. And this is something that will definitely need to be taken into consideration. I'm sure the Department of Archaeology and Museums will not be stripping its museums of all their artifacts to create this museum. And now we, of course, have very good 3D modeling, which is possible, and 3D printing. So that should not be much of an issue at all. In fact, I have seen Dr. Garge has a beautiful 3D model recreation printed of the very famous Kolhapur Neptune. So I think we can be rest assured that they will not be doing that. At the same time, your idea of including private collectors and asking private collectors to come forth and either donate or give on long-term loan objects to the museum is also a fascinating idea and something that should be taken into consideration. Perhaps also what you said in the beginning is important, that the focus of the museum should be taken into consideration. And with such a huge vista that Dr. Garge has painted for us last Saturday, it would be quite a challenging experience to do so. Thank you very, very much, Amiteshwarji. I'm corrected, image of the Kolhapur Poseidon, not the Kolhapur Neptune. Thank you, sir. So, well, ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is Professor Pandurang Sable of the Deccan College Postgraduate and Research Institute, deemed to be a university, Pune. Professor Sable is a very, very well-known geologist and has been working with the Deccan College for some time. So it gives me great pleasure to invite Professor Sable to speak next. Thank you very much, sir, for being here, and the floor is yours.
Sir, he's not there in the meeting room. I think he just lost connection.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. I think we've lost Professor Sable. Connectivity all over Maharashtra and elsewhere is pretty bad today for some reason. Just our bad luck, but we'll wait for him to come back. In the meantime, I would like to call one of my colleagues, or technically ex-colleagues from the University of Mumbai, the head of the Department of History, Dr. Manjari Kamath, to come up and speak to us next. Thank you very much, Manjari ma'am, for being here, and we'll be very interested in hearing what you have to say.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Dalal. So first of all, it's an honor to be a part of this advisory committee for the proposed museum on Maharashtra state. What I would like to stress on, since as far as the curation aspect is concerned and the museum aspect, there are experts here. So I would like to stress on the thematic aspect, particularly the theme in which I have some expertise. And my area of interest being modern Maharashtra, and in particular, the history of industrialization and labor as well as health. I would like to in brief speak about this. Now, as we know, in those days, it is the Bombay Presidency we are speaking about, which included Gujarat as well as the Deccan and the Southern Maratha country. So I think when we think about the economic history of Maharashtra at that period, thematically, I think we could focus on one of the biggest industries in this region, and that is the cotton textile industry. So far, most of the students, even people know about Mumbai, but there is not much that one knows about the smaller towns. So while we portray and showcase the history of this major industry in Mumbai or Ahmedabad, we could also look, at the smaller towns like Sholapur and others, where also these mills existed at that time, and as well as the docks, and that history. Over here, I would like to stress on two elements. One is, if it is possible, then we need to focus on the business history of Maharashtra and Mumbai playing a lead role here, as well as the labor history. In this, one can show thematically the enterprise and the resilience shown by the different communities here. I mean, as against Calcutta, where you have the Scottish, who were mainly the owners of the jute mills in the colonial period, here we don't have them. Here you have Indian enterprise and Indian communities coming forward for cotton and opium trade, and then the transition to industrialists. So I think that could be portrayed in this. And along with that, what I think is crucial for people to know is the public-private partnership. When we speak about the traders and industrialists of those times, they were active in every aspect of the city's life, and many of the contributions and developments of the 19th and early 20th century are because of this public-private partnership. Over the years, I think that has got lost somewhere. So I think the new generation and people who come to the museum need to know about that enormous contribution made by different communities and by business in partnership with the government. And I think that needs to come out there. the difficulties as well. At every stage, when there are difficulties, you have strategies employed by the traders and later, by the mill owners, even in the early 20th century. So that it wasn't just like a unilateral growth. So the history of the cotton textile industry in the colonial contexts and the struggle for, asking for tariff protection from the British and the two world wars and how it impacted Maharashtra needs to come out there. Along with that, the contribution made by them in the fields of education and health. The history of our university, the university buildings, of the hospitals in Mumbai, if you look at the government hospitals which are built, it belongs to that period, whether it is the JJ or GT hospital and so on. And once again, this is a partnership of business, and the government. The second point I would like to stress is the labor history. Slowly, we are in a post-industrial landscape where much of the architectural heritage, whether it is the industrial heritage or the chawls, are facing demolition. So I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us to portray the labor history, to portray the history of Mumbai in terms of an industrial city, the Girangaon, the lifestyle of the workers, the migration, and why there was the need to go back and forth to the rural areas, what that meant, and all that could be, portrayed in this particular museum. Along with that, Mumbai has also seen some legendary strikes, some of the biggest and longest textile strikes, not just in national history, but also in global history. And I don't think many know about this. So one of the biggest strikes at that time was the strike, the textile workers' strike of 1928. So I think that needs to be highlighted, as well as a turning point, not just in labor history, but in the history of the city of Mumbai and Maharashtra, is the 1982 strike, the textile strike, which is the longest strike in global history, with very important ramifications for Mumbai and Maharashtra. So that is something. The last point I would like to stress here is, even when we speak about, I saw in the themes, the national movement, the contribution of Maharashtra, we could emphasize the role of different sections of society here. The labor, the women, you have the naval, mutiny here. So all that I think needs to come in. Lastly, I would like to say this, that some interesting features could be shown. For example, the first ever train journey in India was here in Mumbai, which is today the capital of Maharashtra. The first piped water supply in the country was here. The first session of the Congress was in Mumbai, as well as the launching of the Quit India movement. The first cinema. So, I mean, those kind of the moving pictures, whether it's the Watson, the Lumiere brothers at the Watson Hotel, or later, Phalke and that whole history. So there are many such, firsts which Mumbai and Maharashtra has seen. So here is an opportunity to show that, as well as the architectural heritage in terms of the World Heritage sites here, whether it's the Western Ghats or whether it is the recent Victorian Gothic and Art Deco ensemble, again the second in the world in terms of Art Deco. So all these aspects I think could be a part of these themes. And I would like to end by saying that while we all talk and give our ideas on different aspects of the museum, I think mainly the spirit of Maharashtra has to be there in the museum. So on a clinical level, we may do it brilliantly in terms of each age and all themes, but there has to be that factor, and that is something in which out of the box thinking is required, where you need to bring the essence of of Maharashtra, whether it is through the dance or the bhakti movement, the cinema or the theater, so or different aspects. So how can we portray that, so that when people see the museum and leave, you need that everlasting impact to be there. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Manjari ma'am, for that. And thank you for highlighting modern India and modern Maharashtra and modern Mumbai and Mumbai vis-a-vis Maharashtra and vice versa. So I think these are also very important points that Dr. Kamath has made, and points that we need to take seriously into consideration if we want to look at being more inclusive than anything else. So thank you very, very much, ma'am. I mean, I think these are some very, very valid points that are being taken up. Riddhi, is Dr. Sable with us?
Not yet, sir.
Oh, okay. Since Dr. Sable is not with us, and I think Dr. Nilambari Jagtap is not with us either today. Is she, Dr. Thackeray? Mayur?
No, Nilambari won't be joining us today.
Actually, actually the audio was muted. Yeah, actually she won't be joining us today because of some family emergency. So, and I guess so Professor Sabre, he is facing connectivity issue. He just called me some time back and he told me that he's facing tremendous connectivity issue. So I'm afraid whether he will be really joining.
Because for the day is over, Mayur.
Hello, sir.
And if our list of speaker
is ended now because we do not.
You were saying, Mayur?
The list of speaker is ended, sir, for today's session.
Should we lay the floor open to questions?
With permission of Garge, sir, we can.
Of course, I think not only questions, but also comments from the participants that we can take into cognizance. I did see Professor Dalvi here and some of the other experts from various areas. I think definitely we can invite comments from them.
Yes, as a geologist, Dr. Duraiswamy is here since we missed Dr. Sable, but he can,
yes,
Duraiswamy can give us some inputs for.
Definitely.
And Mustansir Dalvi.
Shall we ask Dr. Dalvi if he'd like to say a few words?
Yes, Professor Dalvi, Dr. Duraiswamy, yes.
Please let them unmute, Riddhi.
Yes, ma'am. Sir has already unmuted.
Morning. Yeah, it was a good session. Is Dalvi sir coming in?
Please continue, sir. We can ask him later.
Okay. So, yeah, it was a very enlightening discussion, especially we at Pune University are in the stage of planning a museum on geology, and I have personally taken a lot of comments from this session to improve my own museum. Like Madam said, if we have to showcase the mineral wealth of Maharashtra, right? Interestingly, Maharashtra has very many unique minerals that are named and documented in history. For example, hollandite is a manganese-bearing mineral found in Gondwana, in the Gond tribal areas of the manganese belt in the Nagpur area. And it was named hollandite after the Director General of GSI, after Mr. Holland. So unique. I haven't seen a specimen of hollandite of late in any museum. Similarly, a lot of zeolites are there. Polsonite, for example, is a vanadiferous magnetite. Polsonite was also named from India, from the chromite deposits. and named after Geological Survey of India. And these, there are many unique rocks in Maharashtra, for example, in southern Konkan and in the Sakoli areas. So if you are thinking of showcasing, like just like Madam said, one of the madams said that Maharashtra has many, Mumbai has many first in the country and also in the world. So we have this unique treasure that we need to preserve and display to the public. Many forts, for example, are made of different varieties, including the laterites from the west coast. In Vasai, for example, it is of the volcanoclastic sediments, Cretaceous age. In the Gold territory, for example, they are made from the Gondwana sandstones. So there are many unique things on Maharashtra, including the fossils from the Chandrapur regions and Lonar, for example, which could be one of the best exhibits that we can plan and execute. If you really want to showcase the geo-heritage in terms of rocks and minerals, then we would be game, as Abhik Madam rightly said, that he and myself will be very interested in having this section in that museum, because it is taking our subject to the masses and making it interactive for the children, because there was a time when parents used to take students or children to museums. That I think so that trend has now declined. So with these few words, I would I gained more from this discussion, and I would be happy to contribute to this forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Doraiswamy. I'd like to welcome Professor Mustansir Dalvi of the JJ School of Arts. And I'd like to ask him to make his suggestions to the panel. Thank you very much, Dr. Dalvi.
Thank you, Dr. Dalal, and thank you, Dr. Garge. I must commend you for this wonderful vision of taking the advice and opinion from a very broad range of people before a project of this magnitude and lasting importance is being taken up. It is very unusual, and for that reason, I think very commendable. So thank you very much for doing that. This is an issue and a topic that is close to many of our hearts and can be discussed in an extremely micro kind of way also. But perhaps that is not something that can be covered in one session like this. So we can let that go. I would like to make just 2 or 3 broad points that come to mind at this stage. And I would, of course, love to know what you think about it as well. The first is that in our curation of, and even in the envisioning of a museum of Maharashtra like this, we must be very aware of what it is that people will physically come to a place like this to look at and to learn and to enrich themselves. The reason I'm saying this is that no museum that we design anywhere from this point onwards can really be unaware of the fact that we live in an information technology rich world. So what is it that I'm going to come to see? Are there going to be artifacts? Are there going to be things of rarity that I will not see anywhere else that make my visit worthwhile? Because if this is not the case, then why are we spending such a lot of money on a museum when it can all be covered in the design, in a very well-designed app. And I mean this with real seriousness, that why should several 100 crore rupees be spent for making a building and putting things in that building when it can all be taken care of for a minuscule cost, but equally enriching through information technology itself. And the curators of this museum have to answer that question first. So this is the first point that I would like to make. The second point that I like to make is the fact that, this is a museum of Maharashtra and not a museum of Mumbai. And I think the way the discussions also tend to kind of lean in the direction of a kind of Mumbai-centric approach for this museum. So my suggestion would be that if we locate the museum in a place which is probably in one of the upcoming tier 1 towns or tier 2 towns, somewhere in the center of the state, it would make a remarkable difference to both its appreciation and its patronage in terms of becoming very much a museum of Maharashtra and not a museum of, Mumbai and by extension, other parts of the state. One of the reasons why I can say this with some confidence is that ever since the last almost 40 years, we have seen spectacular examples all over the world where the presence of a new museum has transformed the city entirely and, upraised the city in a variety of ways that now, makes it a culturally rich place, makes it a place for intellectual advancement, and brings in amazing amounts of revenue, and of course visitors from all over the world. So I think the location of the museum should most certainly not be in a place where there are already so many museums. Okay, and the question to be asked is then what happens to the other museums? Just because you create a bigger one, are you going to just poach from the rest of them? So I don't think that would be such a great idea. The third point which I would like to make is actually emerges from a lot of the speakers, but can be consolidated in this way. And that I think the approach of making a museum like this should be citizen-centric rather than canonical. Okay, we have the canons, we have the grand narratives of museums over the years, right from the Ajaib Ghar model right down to the Bihar, the museum. But it should be from the point of view of citizens, and that would then end up in including everything, including the canon, but would definitely not, leave out or be in any way less exclusive. The approach of a museum design like this should be largely inclusive, largely citizen-centric. Someone mentioned that it should be based on storytelling. Absolutely. And a citizen-centric design would inherently be a narrative kind of design in which everything can, have its own location and place, including the smaller stories from the other parts of Maharashtra, not only the big events that you have already mentioned, but they will also be included. So the citizen-centric model, I think, is the important thing. In a way that, we should also, as thinking as visionaries and curators, not be very innocent about ourselves. We have to accept the fact that we live in this kind of imperfect world. And despite that, we have this glorious heritage that we can be very, very proud of putting on display and organizing in a way that whoever comes to visit can understand. So for the time being, I think these 3 points are enough. Like I said, if we cut it down into nuance, there are so many things that we can discuss. And thank you very much for letting me put my points forward. I would just end by saying that I today kind of represent myself. I, in a form, represent the School of Art where I teach in the School of Architecture. And I also represent Art Deco Mumbai. And I can tell you with great confidence that in all 3 capacities, one would be very, very happy to contribute in very small or larger ways to this wonderful project that Dr. Garge and the state are proposing. So thank you very much once again.
Thank you very, very much, Mustansir, for that. And I think the fact that it will be citizen-centric is something that we should not just take for granted, but we should absolutely stamp across the entire project. I think the point that you raised about why are we building a museum that is physical is a perhaps critically valid point that needs to be specifically addressed. If I may just make one example, there is a lot that cannot be done virtually. There is an enormous tradition of fabric in Maharashtra, which cannot just be seen, but needs to be felt. There is an enormous tradition of food in Maharashtra, which needs to be eaten and not just seen. And there are so many cultural aspects that you need to have hands-on experience for. The wonder of touching a geological artifact, the wonder of touching a meteorite that has fallen from space is something that you can never get from the internet. And these tactile reasons are perhaps which should most definitely have digital shadows of themselves. But those will always be digital shadows. So, I mean, that's my 2 bits on why there should be a physical museum. But I'm sure the Department of Archaeology and Museums and the expert panel will have its own reasons. But I think, yes, we do need to have a set of reasons where we justify. And this is what Dr. Dalvi's main takeaway, I think, is for me, that we need to justify why this museum and why the expense. I also agree and disagree with the location. The tragedy is that the most footfall to the museum would be in Mumbai. I also agree that the maximum impact to the environment, the cultural environment, would be outside Mumbai. So it's a kind of, you know, this way and that way. Riddhi, is Dr. Sable back with us?
May I just make just a small rejoinder for a minute?
I guess so. Professor Sabre has joined us. He has just messaged.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, he has messaged to me. So
yeah, I have joined, sir.
Okay.
So then we will have Dr. Sable's address, which was missing. A very, very warm welcome to Professor Sable. As a geologist, I'm sure he will only enhance what Dr. Doraiswamy has already said. So, sir, please, the floor is yours.
A very good afternoon, all of you. First of all, I thanks to the director of this Museum and Archaeology, Maharashtra State, Dr. Tejas Garge sir, as well as Mayur Thakre, who is organizing and assisting organizing this event. And thank you for giving me opportunity to express my views regarding this museum, which is coming up with large scale. Because of the this very poor this some internet connectivity, I could not able to join in time. But just now, I have listen some views of the experts in last lecture. I'm a basically geologist, and I'm working in a geoarchaeology area in a Deccan College. And first of all, I'll mention, as you aware regarding this material. So the surface of the earth is totally made up of the natural material or geological material, and the antiquities or the material which you are collecting, mostly these materials are belongs to mineral or rock form. And therefore I'm putting some geological point of view, how will be the ideal museum. And right from the keeping of this material, we have to consider the atmospheric reactions, especially the weathering, physical and chemical weathering. Of course, the chemical weathering, which takes place because of the contamination and the material, in the nature, in mineral point of view, there are two types of material. One is a felsic and one is a mafic. The felsic is nothing but acidic, and the basic is nothing but mafic. And therefore, when we keep these antiquities in an open atmosphere, in case of the acidic material, which are made up of soda, lime, potash, and alumina and silicate, they are not giving that much response. That means they are resistance at all to the weathering condition. But the material or the antiquities which are made up of ferrous, magnesium, ferrous, magnesium, rutile, ilmenite, tungsten, molybdenum, and all kind of material which are heavy minerals, which are called as heavy minerals, and which are dark in color. These materials are easily contaminated with the oxygen, hydrogen. So with oxygen, oxidation reaction can take place. Then water contact or humidity, Mumbai-like region, if you are planning this museum, so this region is suffering from high humidity. So humidity means high water percentage in the air, and therefore, so these antiquities, they will easily react with water percentage in the air, and therefore, to avoid this reaction, hydration, similarly carbonation, reduction, so many chemical weathering there are chances, and to avoid this thing, so we have to maintain the proper environment in the museum. That is my one concern, because the Deccan Trap, the antiquity in the Deccan Trap area, so Deccan Trap is made up of basically mafic mineral, which are rich in Fe, Mg, Mn, titanium, magnesium, manganese, and all kind of heavy minerals are more, they get contaminated very fast. Similarly, in case of the physical weathering, so physical weathering takes place by it is also called as mechanical weathering. So heat, temperature, pressure, these are the main object or these agents which are occurring or which are reacting on these antiquities. And we know we are using, if you start to use the normal glass, when you are keeping this antiquity at certain places, so the heat waves, the sun waves, they can directly react with this mineral, which are very sensitive regarding the temperature, pressure, and atmospheric condition. And therefore, during daytime, so if they are open, the heat will directly act, and they will heated at the daytime. And at the night time, due to cooling effect, say about in a winter condition. heating at the daytime and cooling in the night time. So due to heating, expansion of the mineral takes place, and due to night time, contraction of the mineral takes place. And what is the result? So due to repeated expansion and contraction, so micro cracks are developed in the material. Okay, and these mechanical breaking or physical breaking in the antiquities, very rare antiquity when we are planning to put. So we have to take concern about it. We have to use some special glasses to keep this thing so that we can avoid the temperature and to avoid the chemical and physical reactions. Another thing I want to add here, just now, or one of the author, he added, friend, being when we are constructing an ideal museum, of course, the location of the museum is very important. So the natural heritage, so the geomorphological feature of the landscape is also, it will add the beauty in the locality. And therefore, we have to select such a location where we can, means what, it will add the beauty, natural beauty in the location of that particular heritage. And in landscape beauty, natural heritage, I will definitely help to suggest or select such kind of location. And another thing is what? The natural geological processes, which are, means what? Internal process, of course, they are called as tectonic process. And we have to, the atmospheric or external processes we can count or we can see, and accordingly we can make the changes. But the internal process are, they can occur once in 1,000 years, 100 years, 50 years, and like this. So that also we have to keep in the mind. That is the seismic forces. And according to the seismic map, or we can say isoseismal lines, and whatever may the available data, we have to make the design of the building and foundation. Of course, the civil engineers and architect. So I will work with hand by hand with these civil engineers during taking the foundation, because foundation is called as heart of any building or any heritage. So according to the IS code, we have to consider this foundation level also of this ideal heritage, as well as when in aesthetic point of view, to increase the beauty of this monument in aesthetic point of view, again we have to use the proper building stone, which will increase the aesthetic beauty of this heritage. And example given, we know the building stone is a very important component. So the according to the characteristic of the building stone, we have to use the particular building stone at particular locality. Example given, at foundation level, we are always using such a stone which can bear the load of all the building or all the structure. So similarly, at the floor or the stepping stone, arches and verandas and jinas and different balconies of the museum, so which will increase the beauty. According to that, I will suggest this kind of building stone. Some are available in Maharashtra and some we have to export. According to that, we will certainly discuss and we will use this thing. The sources of the material also very important. So some being a heritage of Maharashtra, if you are planning the whole building in a compact basalt or a Deccan trap, so the actually there are 16 types of basalts in Maharashtra are there. But as far as the engineering characters are concerned, crushing strength, shearing strength, tensile strength, porosity, permeability, dry and wet condition, as well as their hardness. So these rocks are vary place to place and according to variety. So therefore, that thing also we have to keep in the mind. all the varieties are not suitable at all for the construction. If we are planning to select this Deccan trap basalt as a construction material, so that is depend, means what, how we are planning to select the material. And another thing is
I think we have lost Dr. Sable. We're very sorry for that. But I think he's got his points across to us very clearly vis-a-vis the geology, the geological stability, and the various different geological requirements that such a museum would have. I'm sure Dr. Sable will be giving all of these points in writing to Dr. Garge, so that will be taken care of. We're really sorry, but his connection seems to be really sporadic, and I kept seeing him show up, as low bandwidth while I was going through this. So thank you very much, sir. I think Mr. Venkatesh would like a minute. Mr. Venkatesh, you have exactly 1 minute.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And it's been a pleasure. Just 4 very quick points, if I may just suggest. In such an expert committee, I'm sure they would have thought of everything, but just a couple of humble suggestions. See, one thing is, in all Commonwealth and post-colonial cities which establish a museum, not just in India, Mumbai, or in South Asia, and wherever the British came and went, dealing with the colonial legacy has always been a tricky situation. Politically incorrect to glorify and academically incorrect to ignore. I think somewhere as a policy, we need to have a cogent understanding of how to deal with the Urbs Prima Nudis, the colonial constructions, the business histories, as Ma'am Kama just said, and a lot of stuff which we have used and benefited from, but yet today it is not appropriate to kind of glorify. I think that fine balance in a museum has to be arrived at by the expert committee. Number 2, one very commonsensical suggestion, in addition to what Ma'am Rupavartha made. If you see European museums, in addition to the actual boards, they will also have handouts which are kept very handy next to the exhibits in every gallery in multiple languages. But because if you are wanting the global audience to come and visit, we need to have all major global languages on those handouts. People can just pick them up, read them, and put them back. That's how most of the European museums function. In addition to audio visuals and the audio commentaries, which you can hire for $2 and $5. The third suggestion is, like we discussed, multiple cultural influences, including Bhakti. May I also please suggest considering including Sufism, because Kuldabad, Rosa, is one of the global centers of Sufism in India. And it has been a very, very key contributor in the cultural, socio-religious context. So that's the third suggestion. The fourth suggestion I draw from the great Dr. Tristram Hunt, the director of the VA. I had the fortune to meet him once. He said, you need to keep your museum relevant for 100 years plus, many, many centuries. So we need to have a way to reinvent the exhibits, the galleries, and continue building the collection over a period of 100 plus years. Otherwise, a museum can very easily turn boring after the first 10, 15 years. So he also said, right from the beginning, it was their initiative to serve the best scones and tea. Scones is a type of bread. So, the food, it has to attract the family, it has to attract the kids. It has, that aspect is what he had explained. So these are 4 humble suggestions, which I just thought I would leave as a museum enthusiast. I'm just a museum enthusiast. And thank you for giving me this 2 minutes to speak. It has been an immensely learning experience to hear from the speakers today. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Dalal. Thank you, Dr. Garge.
Thank you very much, Venkatesh. Those are some very interesting points. Do email us with those points in detail, and I'm sure we'll take them under consideration. Dr. Aparna Vatre is here. She is one of the leading paleobotanists in India and, of course, in Maharashtra. And I would like her to say a few words next, because I think this is an aspect that is seldom ever touched in, our museum spaces these days. Dr. Vatre, please.
Thank you so much. A small correction. I'm not a paleobotanist. I'm just learning paleobotany. I'm basically a botanist, but I work in socioecology. So I've been listening to discussions for quite some time and noting down some of the points. Many are covered. I was just thinking about from my point of view where I've had the best experience uh, of nature outside nature, which is about botanical gardens, or I've put a few of the names in the chat boxes on the Manav Vansh Sangrahalaya in Bhopal or California Academy of Sciences. So what I felt, very strongly in these places is how they bring in the experience of the great outdoors and the humans in it indoors, and that would be a challenge for us. I think we have some of the good examples within India who have managed to do it. So, some of the experiential gardens which have floral aspects or fragrant plants or something, that those are the ideas that we can borrow from. Also, someone just now mentioned that museum is a collective experience, digital is an individual experience, and I think that is something very, very important. I would go a step beyond and say that it's not only people experiencing or viewing something collectively, but also if we can somehow bring in that people can also add to the museum in some ways. It's a little bit of a challenge, but let's look at it from this point of view. How we can make it like a two-way exchange of ideas, information, even experience, which will require very strongly designed interactive component. So maybe that's something that we need to remember. Uh, yes, and it's very important that we remember that this is for a modern person. So too much of interest in the past is there today. So we need to be very careful about how we also bring in the future part of it. So these are the very quick points. But I will just write down whatever I've been thinking and add some of the references when I submit. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Watre, for that. If there's anybody else who would like a minute specifically, please put your hand up and we would be very happy to have your view. I think Professor Nandan Shastri is here. He used to be with the University of Berkeley, if I remember right. So Professor Shastri, the next minute is yours.
Gone are the days when museums were depicting only the past and the present, but the new museology advises us to depict the future also. So I suggest that there should be one gallery on future of Maharashtra also, keeping in the modern trends. And the display should not be only object oriented. The concept oriented display is also very, very essential. I have 45 years experience working in museum here in India as well as in USA. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Professor Shastri. That was very kind of you. The future also must most definitely be addressed. Amrita, if you would like to take the next minute, please.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, very much. Can we see you?
Okay, yeah. I hope. If I may start?
Please.
So we have been speaking about the content a lot, and there would be a lot of content coming in. Content / information / knowledge. There would be so many researchers working in the different sectors. We are talking about the state, so the content would be definitely overwhelming. I want to come at a point where we can talk about the process of developing and designing museum. Since content is a continuous task, it wouldn't be ever-ending task. we can probably talk about how we want to process the things. So when I say process, I mean that we compile or collate the content. Of course, it is an ongoing process. So we devise a data system for collating, collecting content in a different way. The second thing is there would be enormous themes and narratives which are coming out of this content. There would be people who would be interested into contributing the content and the themes. And when I say interested people, those probably are people living in any part of Maharashtra or even outside who want to comment, who want to participate by developing various narratives and themes. That is the way we can incorporate people in the process of developing museum, and we can give a platform to so many people. The third thing where we come at a design point, I have been reading so many comments saying that we can develop AR, we can develop 3D dome, or the ideas are really amazing, but we need to find the befitting idea, as in befitting medium of communication to the content. So just giving an example, we were thinking about developing dioramas. Now, developing a diorama is a huge task. Designing, investing space into it, then giving a proper shape and developing sculptures to it. But this is going to occupy space. So what if we develop the virtual reality in which we can devise so many dioramas virtually? So this isn't just an example. This is how we may address the medium of communication later when we have enormous content categorized into different parts and a proper data system. And once we derive at medium of communication, we can discuss what goes digital, what goes into application website, what goes onto actual site. And then the third point where we can conduct so many visitor surveys, depending on these platforms, where we can ask for people how they're enjoying it and then take a final decision. Just hinting at these things is what actually this process can limit our overwhelming content, and it can help us routine the process.
Thank you, Amrita. That's very well said. And yes, a participative process and saving of space is critical, especially if you're looking at an urban center. Space will be at a very, very great premium, as all of us Mumbaikars and Punekars know very well. Thank you. We have Leena Deshmukh, who's raised up her hand next. Leena, will you please unmute yourself and put on your camera? And you have exactly 1 minute.
Hi. Because I don't live here, I'm a UK resident and I have traveled quite a lot European places where I have noticed like most of the art galleries or museums, they use the existing heritage buildings and they give the modern look to the old buildings. Like in Manchester or in Paris, we can see these kind of buildings. So I feel like in Mumbai or even in Pune or wherever we will planning to do this, we should select the place where we have all these existing architecture buildings, and to give a little bit modern look, or like to give a big modern look like malls or like the Paris Museum, and then convert them into the modern Maharashtra Museum. This is what I feel like that will give both the, rather than just making it like modern big massive building, if we do the combination, then that will attract the especially foreigner customers. This is what I feel.
Thank you very, very much, Leena, and thank you for keeping it nice and crisp. I think Ashley DeMello has his hand up. Hi, Ashley, good to see you here. And the floor is yours for the next minute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Very clearly.
Yeah, I'm only a journalist, not an academic or a scholar. And I've should have retired from the Times some time ago, but I left for going abroad. But my experience abroad and in India, I feel that the museums here are quite often elitist oriented. So when you're telling stories from different parts of Maharashtra, you should have them even at the grassroots level, not only at the top or the middle. That's my humble suggestion.
Thank you very, very much, Ashley. That is an incredibly, incredibly good suggestion. I think Amit had asked in the chat if he could have a minute. So that will be the last person today. So Amit, if you are around, please unmute yourself, put your camera on, and you have 1 minute.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Absolutely, loud and clear.
Okay, yeah. Hi. Thank you for getting this discussion. It's really great to hear so many views from so many prominent experts and expert panel of people who are expert in their own fields. Just as a coin collector and a numismatist, I would like to just suggest one thing, that there's a lot of lack of communication which we as collectors have to go through, because every museum has so much of information and objects which are not on display. So as a collector, when we need some information, it's really hard for us to get information from them, and which is like a very dejecting thing for a collector or a researcher who is very enthusiastic for their own field. So if there's a digital display, it will be really great. And just second suggestion very quickly, the thing is, the way Bihar Museum, the way they brought in all the collectors from across India to display their collections, and that was a kind of interactive way to connect the audience with the museum, with the history, and it was really great initiative by them. So something similar which we can do. And just last thing very quickly, we can keep some themes, like a quarterly theme, which will keep the ball moving and keep the ball rolling rather. So there would be always a level of excitement which collectors or other enthusiasts from all across the board will get to, they will be waiting for the next theme, what the museum is going to come up with. So I think that should be really interactive and kind of a new way of connecting all the possible audience with the museum, and it will be a great initiative, I would say. Thanks a lot.
So I think I'll call somebody from the younger students who are here of the subject of the discipline and ask for their opinion before we close the comment section. I think Ms. Harshada Virkud is here. Maybe she would like to say something. Ms. Virkud. Is Harshada not with us?
So she's there in the meeting.
So Harshada, if you could unmute yourself. And I think, Bansi Chowatia has also put a hand up. So chalo, we'll give her a shot. That will be the last person for sure.
Harshada ma'am, can you start your camera?
While we're waiting for Harshada, let's not waste time. Let Bansi take the floor. Bansi, the next minute is yours. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, so I'm interior design student, and a while back I had visited a garden in Philadelphia. It is called Longwood Gardens. So they have really a nice conservation center for the greenery they have, all the plants, and so they have made the center quite interactive. People can visit the plants, and they have put information near the plants, and they have a staff who gives information about the plants. So like not only keeping the museum only for the artifacts, but also conservation center will add to the beauty of the city also, and also help to conserve the greenery and the beauty of the environment, and it also adds to the sustainability.
True, true. I'm sure that the environs of the museum are going to be very, very importantly a part of the plan. So since Harshada is here with us, I'll ask her to unmute and say a few words.
She has some problem with her microphone. Can you?
Okay, okay. I'm so sorry to hear that. Mugdha ma'am, would you like to say a few words?
No, I'm just saying that next Saturday we are meeting again on 12th June. So please prepare yourself. All of you can join once again, because there are views coming in. It's not that you have joined once, so you stop. Like Commodore or Johnson, you should be joining once again. And we are going to meet again on 12th June, 11 a.m. till 1 o'clock. Okay. People who are interested in museums, museology, and doing something for Maharashtra should also be invited by all of you to join this meeting, because that is the essence of it. You know, let's all work together.
Let's spread the word and let's have more emails.
Am I right? Do I have your blessings when I say that?
Garge, sir.
Unmute.
Of course. I mean, I think on this note, we stop here today. Great to have inputs from all the scholars and experts in the field, as well as collectors and people who actually participated and gave the valuable time. And I think let us meet again on next Saturday. So thank you everyone for participating. Look forward for next Saturday. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Garge. So my job to close, and we are absolutely bang on time today. So thank you very much, everybody, for being with us. Thank you very much for your views and your participation. Please spread the word so that we will have more people with more ideas and more things to say to us next Saturday. We look forward to seeing all of you all with your friends next Saturday. And that's all from me today. Thank you very much. Riddhi, please take it away.
Yogini has just sent an instruction to everybody that you can send your suggestions to our email institutecenter@gmail.com. It's in the chat box. So maybe if you want to write a little longer instead of speaking for 1 minute, if you have material which will spread over 5 minutes, you should write it down and send it to us. And we have our intern Shweta, who's an architect. She will be going through these suggestions and emails and writing a précis maybe and forwarding it to Dr. Institute Trust@gmail.com. Thank you.
Ma'am, also there's a question whether the Zoom link will be same for next week. It will be different and it will be emailed to everyone who registers for the next week's event.
So, Riddhi, do you mean to say everybody has to re-register from this group also?
Yes, ma'am. We'll email it to them, the registration link for next week.
Yeah, without registering, you can just send them the Zoom link.
Okay, ma'am.
Those who have already joined. Now, let's take them one step, right?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, everyone. I'll end the meeting.
Thank you.